welcome residents and guests of the world. My name is Tina Shaw and I work for Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge. I'm the Visitor Center Manager, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Kodiak. Our center was built and opened to the public in November of 2007, and with our guests coming from all around the world, we are glad to welcome you. We pride ourselves as the crossroads of conservation and education. We have more than 500 refuges across the country, and Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge aims at connecting you with nature. Here at our downtown visitor center, which is about 8,000 square feet, we welcome the public to learn everything about bears, to salmon, to ongoing research, and how you can get out and enjoy nature. The key themes of our exhibits relate to the denning behavior of bears, also the salmon life cycle, and the nutrient cycling of the wider circle of life that supports the Kodiak ecosystem. We also have a fantastic exhibit about the birds of Kodiak, and birding in Kodiak is a lot different than anywhere else because there are no roads to the refuge. We call it a birder's paradise, and it's also known as feathers in the fog, because you're far more likely to hear or see evidence of birds than you are to see the birds themselves. So this exhibit is an opportunity to learn about some of those more dynamic and charismatic birds that make Kodiak what it is. Part of the reason that makes us different from the other land management agencies I've mentioned is that we allow for hunting and fishing on our lands. So people do come and they return over and over to the lands of Kodiak to fish and hunt and connect with nature through wildlife photography, environmental education programs, and interpretive activities here at our visitor center. And we welcome you to return. Come back again, have a great stay while you're here with us, and once again, welcome to Kodiak.
This harbor is a protected area inside Katmai National Park, which is famous for two things: for having beautiful volcanic landscapes, but mostly for the bears. And we've come here in hopes of seeing some coastal brown bears. The reason we have so many bears in this area are a couple of factors. One is that it is a national park, so it is a protected area. The bears aren't hunted, and therefore they're not very shy. We're able to get quite close to them from time to time in the zodiacs. And also because at this time of year, the fish are running in the streams. So bears are congregating in river areas and feeding on this plethora of salmon that are found in the streams. So we have huge concentrations of bears in very small areas at the mouths of streams, where we're going with our zodiacs to have a better look at them.
That's a very special place where brown bears show us how important coastal ecosystems are in their life cycle. Geographic harbor, of course, is not the only place where bears are protected, and we can see them in a relaxed mood performing the natural activity, but this is a unique place where we can see them digging clams out of mud in the coastline and observe the behavior a very short distance.
certainly at Geographic Harbour we saw the first insight into the power of the volcanics, and at the background to the bears we saw what was in 1912 one of the largest recorded volcanic eruptions in human history.
We're landing on Unga Island and visiting a small deserting fishing village. It's been abandoned since the 1960s. Quite a few buildings here, and it's a very picturesque place. But the fishing eventually ran out and the people eventually moved away.
The village is abandoned and buildings are coming to ruins, but it's interesting to see how people were settled here, were organizing their life. They had all facilities, they had church, they even kept cows there. And when the village was abandoned, cows were released and ran wild, and now there are funny population of feral, wild, almost wild cows on this island.
We've got a lot of nice wildlife in the area. We've seen a few sea otters in the water, as well as puffins. Dutch Harbor is probably the most important fishing port in all of Alaska. A huge proportion of the U.S. commercially caught fish is from the Bering Sea, and it all comes in and out of Dutch Harbor, being the main port. Of course, Dutch Harbor is also famous for being on the TV show World's Deadliest Catch, for the place that the crab fishermen go in and out of during their fishing season in the Bering Sea in the middle of winter.
We have a song that's very dear to our hearts. It's called the O St. George song. This song was written by teachers that were teaching here back in the 1940s. And this song has been sung in our community from generation to generation to generation. And we'd like to share a song with you. Sichas, Tuckin, Ala, Kunkin. Oh, St. George, you're our St. George. Misty clouds of the sea, we love your cliffs and snowy drifts and all that belongs to thee. You're our home, sweet home. May you always be the place we love, oh God above. Keep
St. George is one of 5 Pribilof islands located in a pretty quiet section of the Bering Sea. It's got some dramatic cliffs, and it's famous for having nearly 90% of the Pribilof's breeding seabirds and the largest seabird colony in North America. A lot of thick-billed murres, a lot of kittiwakes, and sometimes the Pribilofs are known as the Galapagos of the North. They're also famous for their fur seal rookeries, both historically and present, as there are about 250,000 northern fur seals that live here.
Good afternoon, dear friends. We appreciate your visit and your interest to our homeland. We're happy to meet you here in Providenie at our performance center that's located on the seashore of the most beautiful Chukotka Peninsula's Providence Bay. And we have a great news for you, that you can meet the most ancient nations here, Eskimo and Chukchi people. Welcome to Chukotka.
The most stunning thing about Providenie is that they have extremely well-organized and interesting ethnographical museum. Collection of artifacts in this museum survived in the hardest time of late 90s, and it's only due to extremely strong enthusiasm of people who are running this museum.
The small town of Lorino Village has maybe 1,500 people or so living here. Still largely a subsistence lifestyle. They do hunt a number of gray whales each year. They're allowed to harvest approximately 40 gray whales, and we've seen a section of the gray whale that remains from the successful hunt they had yesterday, still down on the beach.
Captain Savic is squeezing the ship between the Russia-US border and the coast of Big Diomede, making the first ever transit north between the Diomede Islands since the end of the Cold War. Beautiful views of these incredibly important islands, little piece of Cold War history, and we're through the Bering Strait and on our way to the Russian Arctic.
Cape Bering is the northeasternmost point of Wrangel Island and one of the major seabird colony on the island. The species composition for the seabird colony is typical for the high Arctic. There are two species of puffins, invasion of which is quite recent, probably related to global warming, but kittiwakes, thick-billed guillemots, cormorants and glaucous gulls are most common species for the colony. And this is also one of the major polar bear maternity denning area. Usually in autumn time many bears come and land at this area and stay, and the number of bears which we could observe at our visit was unusually high for this time of year, and that is because there were walruses holding out and polar bears came to hunt on this small walrus rockery.
Walrus can be quite skittish when they're on land. They're very confident in the water, but they're sometimes a little bit hard to approach. So in the Zodiacs we have to really cautiously creep around the corner and see if we can get a better look at them without spooking them.
Our visit was the first expedition which sighted walruses holding out on the rocks at the very point of Cape Bering, and in that case walruses used these rocks the same way as they're using ice floes. These rocks give them shelter from polar bear attacks. From rocks they can more easily escape in water if they are attacked by polar bear.
One of the great days, and I think in everybody's memory, is where we're tiptoeing into the polar pack ice, where we see the sea ice, certainly loose flows to start with, first year ice drifting and melting from the Arctic winter, and then a little further as we approached the higher geographical latitudes we saw ice a little bit thicker. This was the multi-year ice, and I'm sure many of us had thoughts of the early explorers as they fought their way across to attain the North Pole itself.
After a truly beautiful day cruising the ice of the polar pack at our furthest north of the expedition, around 73 degrees north, we've spotted polar bears and walrus and seals on the ice, had stunning views of the ice floes and beautiful light. And with these magical conditions we have a special opportunity to lower down the marina and go for a polar plunge. It's going to be chilly though. The water is a brisk 0.7 degrees Celsius, just above freezing.
Here we are at Wrangel Island, landing at Cape Florence area, which is the western coast of Wrangel, and a good sample of one type of Wrangel Island's tundra with a number of flowers, some still in blossom.
These vast open tundra landscapes are absolutely beautiful. The plants that grow here are quite short. It's a very harsh climate, a lot of abrasion from the snow and the wind, but the plants that do manage to survive are very tough and hardy things. Some tiny little delicate blossoms are still flowering quite close to the ground, and the beauty of this tundra landscape is that we can see these vast open distances and watch for miles and miles.
This really is a very exciting part of our expedition. We're the first non-Russian ship to be allowed to go to Wrangel Island since the end of the Cold War, and probably since the Second World War. It's required a lot of work on behalf of our Russian team to get the permits required to visit. It's a historic event, and we're in for a couple of very exciting days as we explore this wild and beautiful island.
Cape Dezhnev is the easternmost point of continental Asia. There's a lighthouse that is maintained here with the use of some radioactive batteries that we have to stay a little ways away from. Llewellyn is a small village that is home to approximately 800 people, but a large proportion of those are children. There are about 200 kids in this very small town. It's also quite well known for its ivory. There is what's known as an ivory factory, but that's simply a workshop where a lot of the locals are carving ivory, doing scrimshaw on these walrus tusks and creating some beautiful pieces of art.
I think we've all been pleasantly surprised by the beauty of some of the pebbles, and many of us picked up pebbles and looked at the stripes in them, looked at the darkness, maybe looked at some of the vesicles in them, but no more so that on the beach at Llewellyn, where they had been polished almost to a quality that you could have made jewellery out of them. And I'm quite surprised that they haven't started some form of cottage industry along the coast there.
Itagrun Island is known for its whalebone alley, which was an ancient marine mammal hunters' village. And Itagrun is a Chukchi name. Original Eskimo Inuit name for the island was Sikluk, and most likely the ancestor village was maybe a couple thousands years old, but the alley itself is dated about 300 years old. And this was a place where native people from Sinявin Strait area were gathering together for hunting bowhead whales. They were also staying there to develop process whale carcasses and to store meat in the stone pits.
We've seen some Arctic ground squirrel as well as pikas. running around on the rocks here, both small mammals that are found in Arctic environments, once in a while popping out of their holes or on top of these whale bones to have a look at us as we try to look at them.